Today I'm going to put together a new system. Why? I have no idea. I ended up with this Opteron chip a long time ago from an eBay auction for like a few bucks. So I figured I'd hold on to it till one day I'd end up with a board for it. So I ended up getting a really nice super micro board off eBay for like 45 bucks, 50 bucks. And yeah, so I kind of went, well, I got the board, so I should probably get a case for it and a cooler and a power supply. And before I knew it, I somehow gathered this stuff to build a computer for no reason. So yeah, I got a cooler on eBay. Oh no, I got this on Amazon. These are actually kind of hard to find. This is a C32 socket. We'll get into the motherboard in detail in a minute. Also got 8 gigs of RAM, cheap ass Corsair CX430M. I know everyone complains that they're so cheap and they're terrible. I've never had a problem with them. I have a couple of them around, and yeah, I've just never had a problem with them. They're modular, which is a requirement for me because I hate dealing with extra cables. I've just got a spare video card. It's like a ATI Fire Pro or some nonsense. I have a spare 60mm Noctua fan, which I will possibly replace the cooler fan off this Dynatron heatsink. It depends on how much noise this thing makes. If this thing's not too bad, I'll just keep it. Not a big deal, but it's good to have a spare Noctua just in case. I've got the miscellaneous cables, serial ATA, whatnot. And the case is a Corsair 100R, which is one of their cheapest cases, and it's got the lovely window for no reason. Yeah, so let's take a look at some of the parts. The chip I've got here is an AMD Opteron, which is the equivalent of their, it's basically their Xeons. It's a 4280, which is an 8-core, 2.8 gigahertz chip, which can turbo boost up to 3.5 gigahertz, which isn't bad if you're using less than 4 cores. If you're using more than 4 cores, it's limited to 3.1. This is not the most powerful chip in the world. I mean, Bulldozer, which is the architecture, had a lot of problems. Mainly the issue with it is that the cores are relatively weak, so that when you're not using a multi-core app, it actually really sucks. Like, its performance is just terrible. But you know, we'll give it a shot with some multi-threaded stuff. Maybe we'll try out a handbrake run and you know, see what we can do with that, since a video encoding really likes multi-threaded stuff. So in addition, I've also got a spare Kingston 120 gig SSD and a spare Western Digital 500 gig RE3, which is their enterprise class 7200 RPM SATA drives. So you know, that'll be the storage. We'll have some lovely SSD speed for the operating system, and then this will be bulk storage for whatever. I'm probably going to install the technical preview of Windows 10 on it, just because, well, I can without, you know, any problems that comes with the code. So it's no big deal. The motherboard is a Supermicro H8SCM-F. It came in the largest anti-static bag I've ever seen. It's literally 4 times the size of the motherboard. Anyway, this particular board is quite nice. It's the socket C32, which has these 2 big screw lugs for the heatsink. It's got a 16x PCI Express and 2 8x. I do not believe these are electrically 16 and 8s. I think this is like an 8, 4, and 4 or something like that. I'd have to look it up. Single PCI, standard 32-bit PCI slot. We've got 6 serial ATA ports. They're all 3 gigabit. If I can dig up a 6 gigabit controller, I'll throw it in there, you know, just because I got an SSD, so might as well have the extra speed. Old school parallel ATA. Really nice onboard internal USB port for flash drives if you're using this as a server. It uses dual Intel gigabit NICs, which is really nice. It has a Nuvoton based remote management chip. I believe that's what this does. It definitely has remote management. I just can't remember if that's a specific chip that does it. There's an extra 100 base T Ethernet port to make use of it. 2 USB ports, PS2, serial, and onboard VGA. It's pretty useless. It's just an onboard Matrox VGA controller, no acceleration or anything. And, you know, the nice stuff that comes with most Supermicro boards, like, you know, extra serial ports, that kind of stuff. On the back is just a big mounting plate. Sometimes you have to pick these up separate because not all boards have them attached, but luckily this came with it. There is a nice set of SMD. These look like international rectifier. They're probably PWM controllers. Yeah, maybe not PWM controllers. They're I don't think they're the MOSFETs because the MOSFETs will be under this heatsink and the chokes and whatnot. But they obviously have something to do with the voltage regulation. And you've got some more stuff for the memory slots. This supports up to, I believe, 128 gigs of registered memory. Registered memory is different to regular memory in that some of it is basically some of it's buffered in a way that it can it reduces the load on the memory chip subsystem or the memory controller subsystem. Just grab these memory sticks. I've got 2 sticks of crucial 133 megahertz registered memory. They're both 4 gig. It's slower than it can actually support. It supports up to DDR3 1600, but this is what I got. This was only like 15 bucks or something like that for 8 gigs, so you know, all deal. And I got the back plate for the motherboard, and we've got some SATA cables that came with the motherboard, which was nice. We got the video card. Again, I cannot remember what specific model this is. It's like some 128 meg model. You know, passively cooled, no extra power needed. It does, however, have the high density DVI connector, which needs this funky adapter that splits it into 2 DVIs. So you need this crazy adapter on it. Not a big deal. And we also have the Dynatron cooler. This baby is a 60mm fan, and it's just an aluminum heatsink. The whole thing's aluminum. It's got some really old thermal paste on it, which we're going to take off because we're not going to use that. We're going to apply some lovely Noctua NTH1, which is my thermal paste of choice. We'll just get that cleaned off with some alcohol. And what the hell, we'll use this stupid prep surface thing that came with some Arctic silver. So, you know, what the hell? I don't know if that's just snake oil or not, but it came with it. So I prepped this as well as I can. Yeah, you can still see an outline of where the thermal paste has been sitting there for like, you know, 10 years or who knows how long. But I'll just take this taped on cover off. LGA 2011. Well, we know what they upgraded to after. And there's just a little bit of tape here. Let me just get this off before I forget about it, because if you forget about the tape, you can end up putting in a memory stick and jamming the tape into the socket, and then it's a real problem to get out. So always good to clean it when you first see it. So let's get this chip. Now this is a very, very heavy chip. I assume it's from the really heavy thermal transfer of the cap. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to give this a little wipe down, because this chip hasn't been in a socket for a long time. So I'm just going to wipe off the pads. There's a bit of discoloration on it, and it's always been like that, so I don't know if that's you know, a big problem or not, but it doesn't come off. See, I don't know if it shows up, but there's a little discoloration there and there. And yeah, it doesn't really clean off, so I don't know. I'll put some of this prep stuff on it anyway. Don't know if that helps at all. I have a little lint-free cloth. Just dry that off a bit. Good enough. Now, I've never used one of these sockets. It has a ton of pins. Now, which way? Okay, it looks like it installs this way. So the C32 socket. Oh, someone left thermal paste on this. I hate that. Let's see if we can get that off. All right, there we go. Good as new. So the C32 socket is the equivalent of a high-end workstation socket. There's also the G34 socket or something along those lines, which is huge. And that socket's for the bigger 6000 series Opterons, which have 16 cores, or up to 16 cores. So, yeah, I mean, this is like their fancy workstation one. I have seen dual socket motherboards. Asus makes them, and a couple others, but they're just too expensive. I mean, the cheapest one I've seen is like $200, so it's not worth it for the project I'm working on. Which again, I don't know what this is for. So hey, why not? It's a weird socket. Is that supposed to like not line up with it? That just seems weird. Well, maybe I'll pop that off and take another look at it off camera just to double check. But I'm assuming that's how you do it. Or at least I'll Google some images of the socket and maybe that'll shed some light on the situation. So the other thing I'm going to look up is what the primary memory slots are, because you generally want to populate it as they recommend. And it's not always the lowest numbers. Like this is 1A, 2A, 1B, 2B. And sometimes it's not A. Almost always it is. So I'll probably just put them in, and we'll see if it starts up. But sometimes it's actually the second one, and they just label it wrong on the silk screen, or they don't think of it that way. And oh, maybe it's just the color, the lighting. But it looked like this was actually. Let's see. Doesn't it kind of look like this is conformal coded? That's weird. Oh well. And another thing I want to do is let's pop these heat sinks off and take a look. So yeah, over here we have the main platform controller, the north bridge, and this smaller chip is the south bridge, which connects to all the peripherals. And yeah, not too much under it. This heatsink really wobbles. You may have heard it click at the end of that last clip, and it's not centered. I don't know why they designed it like that, but it just doesn't stay on properly. Maybe I'll replace the little pin locks. The thermal compound on the heatsink is just really dry, so I just scraped off a bit of it. You don't need to scrape it all off because you're just covering that one spot. I also put on brand new push pins. Look a lot nicer than the really cheap beat up ones that were already on it. And I'll just put a little bit of thermal paste on that. I think this is on pretty tight. There we go. Just needs a drop. There we go. That should be good. And does it matter which way this goes? I don't think so. Okay. Now there's a possibility these don't fit into the motherboard. Oh no, they do. Okay, good. Because sometimes they're weird shapes or weird thicknesses and they don't fit. So that's why it's a good idea to take these off carefully so you can reuse them if it doesn't fit. So just make sure that went all the way through. Yep. Alright. So that's one heatsink done. Let's double check this chip. So I did some Google searching, and yes, that is apparently how this is supposed to look. The chip is actually off center on all the ones I've seen. So that means we're going to install the cooler. Now you got to make sure you're putting it in the right way. You have to think of airflow. So the connectors are all back here. So you want the airflow to go from front to back. So front, back, this is the direction the fan's going. And actually, oh no, this fan doesn't have it. Most fans have a little arrow to indicate which way the fan blows. There you go, see? Rotation and wind direction. So you know it's going this way. Now this is a big fan with a large surface area, and the chip is very heavy, so I'm going to put on a fair amount of thermal paste. Now I used to use the method where you just use a credit card or whatever and spread it out evenly. The problem with that is it can form air pockets. So what I've switched to more recently is just the blob in the middle and let the pressure squeeze that out. So that looks like quite a bit, but one, this chip is a little beat up, So there are a couple scratches on the surface there, so I want that to be properly filled in. And another is that this chip, or sorry, the heatsink is like a brushed aluminum, so there's more gaps than usual on it. Now you gotta keep in mind that thermal paste is there only to fill in the teeny tiny air gap between the chip and the heatsink. It is not there to like cushion it or anything. You don't want a lot of it on it because it's actually diminishing returns big time. The more you put on, the hotter your chip is going to get by far. Now I'm actually going to have to back this off a little bit, maybe all the way. This heatsink is very touchy about there lining up. So let me just get this started, and this one started. There we go. Now, aside from jamming the screwdriver into the motherboard, you want to go a bit slow and tighten these up evenly, so you get not only an even pressure on the thermal paste, you don't stress the board any more than you need to. This is a tiny screw. Yeah, it's closer to a Phillips number 1. Okay, so it has a dead stop. Okay, let me just make sure I didn't destroy the board. Nope. So let's find the correct fan header. Fan 3, fan 2, CPU fan. Alright, over here. And of course there's no nice way to route this, so maybe I'll unscrew the fan and rotate it a bit so the wires stick down a bit. Hang on. So I've unscrewed and removed the fan, and what I'm basically just trying to do is rotate it 90 degrees so that the wires are coming down on a nicer angle. It's a purely aesthetic choice, but I don't know. I don't like it when there's like a big bundle of wires running across the lovely interior of your computer, even though this is hardly, you know, a beautiful build to show off to your friends. Yeah. But I would like, you know, to minimize the ugly wiring on it. Now these screws are kind of touchy, so what I've done is they've kind of just gotten stuck. So I just turned them a little bit and they got stuck, and that's fine. And it's basically just holding it in place while I get the other screws in properly. So now I'm going to back the screw off a bit and start it again. There we go. Because these are self-tapping screws into the heatsink. Well, into the shroud over the heatsink. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're going back in through the threads. So it may take couple tries to get it started. There we go. But once you line it up, you'll feel that it goes in a lot easier, and you're reusing the threads rather than trying to cut new ones, which can lead to being really loose. Like it just widens the hole to the point where you can't use it. So another thing I want to do is get the measurement of how long this is going to be, and we can loop this around. It's going to be a little too short. This might be too short to use a wire tie on, so maybe we'll just leave it like this for now, at least for testing purposes. Speaking of testing, see, like one of the reasons why I want to get it shorter is because this could get sucked into the fan blades and make a lot of noise or break the fan. So in the meantime, let's just like tuck that out of the way. Get our 2 memory sticks. 1. 2. And get these old pins out of the way. Throw them away actually. Move some of the tools and the drive, and we'll get this power supply hooked up so that we can see if this thing even turns on, because I've had this board for not too long, only like a couple weeks, mostly enough time for my parts to arrive. The thing I was waiting for was the memory and the cooler, both of which came today. This is the 8-pin. Oh, that's weird. Why would they do that? Huh. Check this out. So this is the fan power connector for the CPU fan. And we've got the 8-pin 12-volt power supply. And look at this. They put a cap right there. And on more modern boards, these are, or power supplies, these are quite wide, the little locking tabs. So what I'm going to have to do is these split, and I'm going to have to chop off this one just so it'll fit. There we go. I just chopped off that one little tab, and now it's held in. The you know, it's not as good as it should be, but it won't go anywhere. It shouldn't be a problem. Let me just reconnect the fan before I forget. That's even a tight fit. Well, usually super micro boards are pretty comfortable to work with. Like, they have a wide spacing between all the components. But this is a micro ATX board, so it's, you know, pretty compact. Like you can see, it's not a very large board altogether. So yeah, I mean, you know, it's not as bad as working with an ITX board, I guess. So let's get some stuff plugged into this. We'll get power plugged into the power supply. Power supply is currently off. That's good. Dropping my little things, and we need video. Get that connected. And I've got a keyboard around here somewhere. Hang on. Okay, this is just my cheap ass Logitech keyboard, and we'll give this a power test. Alright, gonna hit the power on the power supply. I don't know if it'll automatically start up or not, but you know, in case it catches fire, we want to see that, right? Okay, a little rev from the fan. This is kind of annoying fan sound. Nothing on video yet, but with Supermicro boards, they can often take quite a while to show up. The reason for that is it's powering up the internal remote management system. So it can actually take a little bit of time before it actually kicks on the screen. So I'll just give it a minute, see if it shows up or not. If not, there may be some kind of problem. In fact, I see a flashing green LED on the motherboard near the Nuvoton controller, which is most likely indicating that the remote management system is currently booting. So I waited around for a minute and did some reading at the same time, figured out that the memory is in the right slots. So one thing I did notice is that there are two LEDs on the board, but only one of them is flashing. The one that's flashing is for the remote management, but the actual power LED is not on, despite the fact that the system is pulling 50 watts and running the CPU fan. So yeah, I'm going to try shorting the connector labeled power on. Interesting. Nothing. Let's try power cycling it. There is a possibility that I need some kind of BIOS update in order to use this chip. Okay, so I believe it's just not outputting VGA because it is responding to the power switch. So let me just make sure my display is set to analog. Okay. So again, it's possible that it's set only to use an external video card, in which case I'll try plugging in a video card. You never know what the BIOS settings are. The next thing I'm actually going to try is resetting the BIOS. No, not getting anything. So here's the pads for resetting the BIOS. I'm just going to get some metal, touch them together, make sure I get good contact. Okay, try powering up again. Oh, it's staying off this time. So I've got some good news and bad news. The good news is the remote management is working, and I'm able to connect to it and view some information, so I know at least that part's operating. The weird stuff is that the sensor readings are kind of way off. For one, it's saying there's no 5 volt or 12 volt rail. The CPU temp says uninstall, and yeah, the system temp is recording. The Northbridge temp says it's quite hot. Oh yeah, it is. This is going to need a fan. 61 degrees. Yeah, so it's not detecting the CPU. Now that could be a mounting problem, or it could be due to the firmware not recognizing the newer chip, because the 4200 series is newer. I don't know if there was a 4000, but there was definitely a 41 and a 43. Plan B is I contact Supermicro and just tell them the version number of the chip, and just tell them, hey, you know, my board isn't functioning properly. Does it require a firmware update for it to work? Or is there, you know, like, is this a known problem? Because one thing is that there's no beep code. If it was a problem with the memory or something, it would beep. And it's weird that it's telling me the voltages are off. And as far as I know, the boards work, because I mean, this guy had like 5 boards. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reseat the CPU and hope that that fixes it. Because, well, it is generating heat, so it's a good sign. I mean, it's only a little warm. It's mostly this Northbridge that's getting hot. Man, to think that heatsink wasn't on properly before. This GPU's moderately warm. But there's a fan slot right out here in the case, so, oh no, maybe it's up here. But we'll try and get some airflow on this Northbridge. I am at a loss. I've completely removed and reseated the CPU, double checked it, cleaned it again, had to put on more thermal paste, tried booting without memory, trying a different power supply. There's a method that works on some motherboards from Supermicro where you load up a BIOS file with the name super.rom, and you boot up holding Control and Home, and that didn't work. I've tried updating the onboard BIOS the firmware for the remote management, and that doesn't seem to work properly, but that could just be like a browser issue or something. I don't know. It's saying some voltage rails are missing. And I also double checked to make sure that the screwdriver impact didn't hit anything, and from what I can tell, it didn't. I looked over it pretty detailed and even reviewed the video to see right where it hit. And I'm at a loss, so I fired off an email to Supermicro, and we'll see what they say. Maybe there is some issue with it not supporting the CPU, and it needs an update, which maybe they need to provide me. I don't know. Even the battery voltage on the CMOS battery isn't showing up in remote management. So I've got no idea. It's possible either the CPU or the motherboard is damaged in some way. Hopefully the Supermicro support guys can let me know. I mean, if this is something that's indicative of a dead CPU, that's fine. I can always get a new CPU. If it's the motherboard, that's a little bit more annoying because, you know, I paid proper prices for the motherboard. The CPU was just, you know, a few dollars. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I think I'm gonna have to put this one on hold until they get back to me, unfortunately. I've gone back and forth with Supermicro's technical support, and in the end he basically said you should just send it in. I'm not sure if it's the CPU or the motherboard causing the problem, but I don't have another Opteron chip or another C32 motherboard to try it out. So yeah, he said basically send it in under an RMA. I don't know if it's like covered. I don't know if they're going to want money to repair it. Obviously, if they want money, it's probably not worth my time to fix it because, well, the board was like 45 bucks on eBay. So, yeah, I'm going to pack it up and send it in. I scraped off the rest of the dried thermal compound underneath this thing, whereas before I just scraped out the center part because that's all that matters. But to make it look nice, I cleaned it up and just put a drop of thermal paste on here and put on, I don't think these are exactly the same, but I put on little push pins from another Supermicro board because I threw away the other ones that I pulled off. See, that's the problem. You see a problem, it's like, oh, you know, this thing's not held on right, I should fix it. Before you even think, well, wait, does it work? Do I need to send it in under warranty? Should I be modifying it first? But yeah, these are similar enough that I don't think it's a problem. So yeah, I'm going to send this in, and I guess stay tuned for part 2 if I ever get this thing back.